Namaskar. Friends, in the previous discourse, number 80, we have learnt what yajna is. And yajna has two forms, the external form and the internal form. External form of yajna includes offerings, external offerings to the god of fire in those days. But the internal form of yajna is the real sacrifice. This sacrifice is nothing but offering one's own petty self. This is the greatest sacrifice, and this sacrifice is yoga. When we sacrifice the petty self, we are freed from the karmic duties. We can transform ourselves. Thereby we can bring the universal transformation. This internal sacrifice, giving one's own self, surrendering one's own self, sacrificing one's own self, is called giving. This giving is the greatest dharmic principle. This internal sacrifice is the greatest dharmic principle. Only by giving we receive. By sacrificing we receive. But this greatest life value is different. Than the value that we have in the contemporary world. The contemporary society is ego-based and commercial-oriented, whose primary duty is to rob, to take, and not to give. So by giving, we can receive plenty from nature. What is that we gain by sacrificing, by giving this petty self? The nature bestows abundant peace, happiness. We are totally transformed. And this transformation brings greater peace and happiness on this most beautiful planet. We are not indeed discharging the duties that are entrusted to us in an honest way, in a sincere way. Even those duties and responsibilities that are assigned to us in our profession, we are not discharging. Therefore, how can we expect to give, to sacrifice the self? It's not by distributing wealth, by involving in charitable actions, you can attain that state of bliss. That is segmentary, that is part, that's not total. The complete sacrifice is the sacrifice of this self, which consists of samskaras, karmic impulses, vasanas, and so on, accumulated over a long time. This Vedic Yajna is also called tapas. Tapas is one of the niyamas we have already learned. It actually stands for following austerities in our life, in our living. And this tapas has a purifying power. And Vedic Yajna is tapas. It has the power of purifying ourselves. When we surrender ourselves, we are purified. And this is what we have learned in the previous discourse. Now, in this discourse, the speaker would like to introduce the 5 great Vedic Yajnas. And these 5 Yajnas, Vedic Yajnas, are called Mahayajnas, great Yajnas. What are these 5 Yajnas? The first is Brhma Yajna, the second is Deva Yajna, the third is Manushya Yajna, the fourth is Pitri Yajna, and the fifth is Bhuta Yajna. What are these 5 Vedic Yajnas? All these 5 Yajnas are related to our living. All these 5 Vedic Yajnas talk about the sacrifice of ourself. Let's first take the Brhma Yajna. Brhma Yajna is studying the scriptures, the Vedas, listening to the holy sacred discourses. Not merely reading and listening, but we need to reflect, contemplate. And this is what constitutes Brhma Yajna. This is something that comes close to Svadhyaya, self-study. One of the niyamas stipulated by Patanjali in Yoga Sutras. The second is Deva Yajna. This is nothing but worshipping the divine, the cosmic powers. Worshipping here means not merely following in a ritualistic manner, following all those rituals that are associated with the worshipping. No. Worshipping here means a total surrender to the cosmic powers. This comes close to Ishvara Pranidhana, another important niyama. The third is Manushya Yajna. This is nothing but honoring our ancestors, our sages, yogis, entertaining guests, treating them in a proper way, with all respect and due honor. Our fellow human beings, extending that love, the sense of love to all our fellow human beings, treating them equally without discriminating them on any basis. That is called Manushya Yajna. Pitri Yajna is related to respecting and honoring our own forefathers and mothers. The culture, the ancient culture, the societal traditions and values, these constitute Pitri Yajna. And the last one is Bhuta Yajna. Bhuta Yajna means respecting other living beings on this earth, which include plant kingdom and animal kingdom. Respecting the land and water, and thus preserving and protecting this beautiful planet, the biodiversity and the ecology of this beautiful planet. This is different from Manushya Yajna. In Manushya Yajna, we respect and love our fellow human beings. But in Bhuta Yajna, We include the entire nature. We respect and honor the principle of life that flows in all creatures. Only in form they are different, so we will never indulge in violence, in killing of any creature. Thereby we preserve and protect the biodiversity and the ecology of this planet for long. This is our primary duty. This is the greatest dharmic principle. All these 5 yajnas are called Mahayajnas. And these 5 Mahayajnas are related to various forms of yoga. The yoga of knowledge, the yoga of devotion, and the yoga of service and action. That is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga. The first one, Brhma Yajna, which involves reading the scriptures and Vedas. This in turn will enlighten us, since we contemplate on such reading of the text. So they purify ourselves. This gives us greater awareness and intelligence. And therefore, Brhma Yajna is equated with Jnana Yoga. Deva Yajna, in which we have already learnt, has the worshipping of the divine and cosmic powers by surrendering oneself. This total surrender, seeking the refuge in the cosmic powers, what is known as Saranagati, is Bhakti Yoga. There are other 3 forms, Manushya Yoga, Pitri Yoga, and Bhuta Yoga. They are related to service and action. They involve human beings and other creatures. Therefore, these 3 yajnas can be called as Karma Yoga. So when we follow all these 5 great yajnas, Brhma Yajna, Deva Yajna, Manushya Yajna, Pitri Yajna, and Bhuta Yajna, we are invariably following the 3 forms of yoga, namely Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga. All these 5 yajnas, called as Yajnas, will transform us, will purify our life. When we follow these 5 yajnas, it means that we are treading the path of yoga. The Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. Yoga is truly happening there. And this is what yoga is, the essence of yoga. Now, in this discourse, friends, the speaker has introduced the 5 kinds of Vedic Yajna, and we have learned how these 5 great Vedic Yajnas correspond to the 3 forms of yoga, namely Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. So let's adopt these 5 Vedic Yajnas in our life, in our day-to-day living, thereby purify ourselves. All these 5 Vedic Yajnas will take us from the lower being to the higher being of intelligence and awareness. And this is what is known as yoga. All these 5 Yajnas must be coordinated in our living. Not that we should follow one yajna and exclude the other yajnas. But we need to integrate all these 5 yajnas in our living. Then yajna is happening in us. We are indeed performing yajna in our life. And when we perform such yajna in our life, we are leading a life of yoga. Namaskar.